Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Elevation Association Experience Podcast. We're your hosts, Dr. Jared Hill, Dr. Dan Nelson. Good to have everybody back with us. I think our listenership is up, Jared. I think we're up to like 25.
Whoa,
Yeah,
that's quite a jump. That's like double what we had before. So that's
we're
good.
breaking through. Things are happening around here. It's just like word's getting out. It's if we could just break into that 30 club, man, we'll really be feeling it.
It's legit. We'll be legit at that point in time.
Well, until then, we're going to share something pretty cool with you guys. So what we have is in Elevation Association, we have a framework that we use to implement a lot of different tools and processes into practices. And part of the framework is built on what we call our three peaks, which is life, leadership, and legacy. And we want to start, there are 8 milestones within each of these peaks. And we want to share with you our leadership framework. We're just going to actually go through a lot of what we're going to peel back the curtain and show you what happens behind here. So for those of you that listen just to hack our crap, this is your chance. So, as always, if you find something that you love, you hate, whatever, and you want to discuss this, after you listen to this, shoot us a message, and we'd love to talk to you about it. But this is actually a presentation based on a presentation, or at least the milestone that Jared has lectured on, and so I'm going to turn the time over to Jared for most of this podcast and let him kind of walk us through what this is about. So, Jared, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks. This is kind of where it all started, right? As far as when we started Elevation Association, this is kind of the big impetus for starting Elevation Association and gathering dentists together and working on things. Because this is, I think, where a lot of dentists get themselves in trouble. I think it's where they struggle quite a bit anyways. The problem is what we found, even talking with other dentists, that it wasn't just me or it wasn't just an isolated problem, is that most dentists never really define success on their own terms. So, and that's what we'll talk about today. We're going to talk about discovering the dream. We're going to talk about what is your version of success? What does that mean? How do you even do that? When people say that, it's kind of this nebulous idea that you think, yeah, I could have a dream, or I could have maybe an idea of what I want to accomplish or lifestyle I want to live, but I'm a dentist, I'm a practice owner, I have to manage the practice or run the practice in a certain way. But in actuality, a lot of the dentists, when you become a dentist and you buy a practice or associate practice, you literally inherit the scoreboard that the profession has sent out for us, right? So the profession, as a dental profession, the consultants are telling you, these are the metrics you should be hitting. This is the scoreboard you should be doing. And then you spend your entire career chasing it. And that is why I think there's so much dissatisfaction in our profession. And so today, let's talk about this. So that when we start working with a practice or a dentist, it's interesting. We don't start with, hey, let's look at your practice and see how we can make it better. The first part is, do you even want to be in that practice? Like, is this where you want to be? Because if you aren't, if you're not the place where you want to be, you're going to optimize yourself into a terrible place, an even worse place than you are. And so really the very first thing that we talk about is the quote that everybody knows: when you fail to intentionally become something, you unintentionally become anything. And that anything often leads to huge levels of unhappiness. So that's exactly what we're going to talk about today is intentionally becoming something, because most of us follow this path or pattern, this pathway set out by the profession or by others that are in the profession, which is maybe their dream, or maybe not. Maybe it's a dream that somebody set for them, and they feel like that's the standard you should be shooting for as a dentist. But when you go to follow that path, you're often going to find you're going to have incredible amounts of success. but that success often leads to huge levels of unhappiness, which is ironic, right? I mean, we go into this find success, but the level of your happiness depends on your definition of success. So we'll get into that today as far as how to go about that, and I think that's an interesting process. Um, so I think what we do, this is where we talk about. You already mentioned it briefly, Dan, but we have our peaks. Every dentist needs more than this is why our shtick is every dentist needs more than just a business plan. You need a
Yeah.
life plan, you need a leadership plan, you need a legacy plan. Like between those three things, you should be able to narrow down really what success means for you and how to do that. So the milestone one within your leadership peak, this Fuji peak, is really just defining success, right? So, what does that mean to you? How do you do that? And when you ask that question, most dentists don't know how to define that, or they have this idea running around in their head, but they've actually never sat down and put it to paper, right? They've never sat down and been like, this is what success means for me. I'm living this way. I'm raising my family this way, or maybe I don't have a family. Maybe this, whatever that means to you, because my definition of success can be wildly different than your definition of success.
Right.
And neither of
Right.
them is wrong, right? But the way that we practice is going to determine, or the way that we define success is going to the way that we determine the way we practice.
Mhm.
And so you have to be able to, instead of when you buy a practice and some people reach out to us, okay, let's look at my numbers. We can sit down and look at the numbers of your practice. And we do that oftentimes. We'll sit down and say, okay, these are areas where we miss. But that doesn't help you necessarily overcome this barrier of unhappiness. This is why we take a step back, and the first step is actually, let's define what success, happiness means for you, and let's take some time. Let's dig into it. Let's not just say this one thing, but let's go through this process of how to discover your dream, of how to discover this success, and then let's see if where you're at is going to do that. And if it is, awesome. If it's not, let's figure out how to get yourself in that right direction.
It's fascinating to me how some docs have a super clear definition of success right out of school. They know I want to own 10 practices and I want to have, this amount of freedom and I want to have, what I want to make this much money, whatever it is. They have these, this really clear definition of success, while others, we find a lot of them in that position you were talking about, where they adopt the definition of success. What's been interesting for me was that I had a definition of success coming out of dental school, but I went into the Air Force, and so my over time you kind of well, for me, I started to lose sight of what that definition was, right? And just because I was in the grind and you just do what you're told, and it's like basically my my ambitions were squashed by Uncle Sam, because you can only do so much within your rank and wherever you're stationed, and so my ambitions were squashed to just being travel. And then it was funny, at our senior year, or our fourth year of dental school, we sat down and wrote down kind of what our goals were coming out. And I remember I wrote down a number that and I've shared this in other podcasts, but I remember I wrote down a number that my my faculty member kind of laughed at me, and he said, "You want to make this house?" And I said, I'd like to make this my second year out of dental school. And he said, "Good luck." Well, the irony is in my second year of private practice, I hit that goal, and so then it was like, okay, well, I've hit these benchmarks that I had. So it made me I started to get lost a little bit in just the grind and stuff. And I'm a pretty ambitious person, and I'm pretty good about defining, what I want out of life. And I had to come back and circle back and really define what I wanted. And what I found, and the reason that I had to circle back, it wasn't even so much that I had just forgotten about it. It's that the way you define success changes as the seasons of life change, right? So you kind of create a moving target. I mean, I sit right now with my youngest daughter about to start school in one day, college, I mean, And, Lindsay and I are going to be empty nesters. And so the way that I look at life today is way different than I did, 20 years ago. So I think that that's the other thing about this is that as we define success, I think that it becomes something that we have to make malleable and be able to change as we're moving forward. But I mean, but how many guys do we know or gals do we know that don't even have a definition of what they want? They're just going through the motions. So you can find it on both sides, both extremes, which I find it interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting too that when we talk about success, defining success, we often start off with that. We often start off with that concept, and it's interesting. Your dental school professor is one that asks you, how much money do you want to make, right? Like the money that you make is going to be your definition of success, right? I'll
Right.
be successful if I can make $200,000 a year, my second year out of school, 300,000, whatever that number is. It reminds me of the study that was done in 2015 in George Washington Law Review Study. So this is a study about lawyers, but I mean, really swap a lawyer for dentist because it's exactly the same thing, right? It was a study about conventional success. It showed that all the traditional markers of conventional success, which are what? Income, prestige, size of practice, location for practicing, whatever the external markers of success you have in this study from George Washington showed that they have essentially zero correlation with happiness. Zero. There's
That's
none.
great. That's great. I mean, you see it, but it's still crazy to hear
We
that.
still, but we still, and then do you remember when we first were partnering and we had an aspiring, he wasn't a consultant yet, but he's an aspiring consultant, come to you and said, well, how much money do you want to make? That was
Yes.
his first question. How much money do you want to make? And so you had these people telling you these are your markers of success. How much? Because and I think the thought is if you have enough money, then you can buy whatever you feel like is going to be your definition of success. When that's totally the wrong way of looking at this. Yes, money does buy a lot of things. There's no question, and I love buying stuff, and there's no question, right? But is that where you should start, right? So, um, and I think, and if you think about this, and now once you think about this, as you're thinking about your own definition of success, like wow, what does that mean? What are you talking about, Jared? If it's not size of practice, if it's not operatories, if it's not, gaining multiple practices, if it's not stepping out of the chair, and managing, if it's not selling it, what is? How do I do this? Well, in the book Who Not How, you've got Dean Jackson who talks about his criteria for success, right? It's kind of this alternative model to using the traditional markers of success to define your own success. So his marker is waking up and choosing the day, right? If I have the freedom to wake up and say, what do I want to do today? That's his marker of success, right? Translate that into your dental practice. Do you own your schedule? Do I wake up and be like, oh, I cannot believe I have to see this person and do these procedures all day today. I hate this. You're making money. It's profitable, but is that really success for you? Um, Another one of Dean Jackson's is, passive revenue, exceeding his lifestyle needs, meaning does the money that he has in his investments more than enough to exceed his lifestyle needs, which sounds lofty, but that's not a numerical goal per se. He had to define his lifestyle needs. So, does the practice pay you as an owner? That's passive revenue. Or think about it, or are you getting paid only as the provider? And this is oftentimes what we get stuck in this trap of we're the provider. We only get paid as a provider. I'm making money, but at the end of the day, if you don't know your numbers, if you don't understand how you're getting paid, you're often not making money getting paid as you're not taking those dividends or distributions. Does the revenue that your practice make exceed your lifestyle needs? Maybe that's a good goal. Maybe that's something that you shoot for. Maybe that's your definition of success, right? Um, Dean Jackson also talks about, he says, living where you choose to live, right? Are you practicing in a place that you practice there just because you can make a lot of money? I mean, how many dentists do that, right? Like, oh man, I want to live in Oklahoma. Sorry for those people who live in Oklahoma. I'm sure you love it, and I'm sure it's awesome, but
We love you, Garrett.
we love you, right? But people who don't want to be there, right? People who want to be somewhere else, but they go there because, I can make a ton of money there. You can practice in this rural area. Are you really choosing that because you need to make money, because that is your definition of success, right? Um, and another one for Dean Jackson is projects that excite you. That's his definition of success. Is he working on a project that excites him, right? Um, Are you working on procedures or parts of your practice that excite you, or you're only doing the top three because those are the only things that make a ton of money for you in your practice? You've nixed some of the ones you don't love because you're not making any money, right? I mean, these are things that we sacrifice in order for money, because that's our definition of success. This is an interesting one. Disappearing for months and no income effect. Is that a realistic one for a dentist as a practice owner? That's difficult, right? But can you delegate? Can you create a practice where maybe you can disappear from us? Maybe you can work remotely. I mean, and doesn't have any effect on your income?
Or 2 weeks and go to a vacation or do whatever. How many
Right?
docs do we talk to that are like, I can't take that time off?
I can't take that time off. I talked to, I think I've shared this before, but I talked to an oral surgeon about Dental Legacy Foundation, coming and doing in Africa, and he's like, "Well, how long is the trip?" And I said, "Well, usually it's a week of actual work, and then if you want to say you can do a 3 or 4 day safari plus travel days, it's about a 2 weeks." And he's like, "Oh, I can't take that time off." He's been practicing for 30 years, and I thought to myself, if I'm an oral surgeon who make the most amount of money of anybody in the dental
Right.
profession, and I've been working for 20, 30 years, and I can't, I say that those words come out of my, I can't take off 2 weeks. There's something wrong, right? To me, and maybe that's not his definition of success. So my definition of success is to be able to take that time off, like you said, 2 weeks to go and do a humanitarian trip. It seems to me like it's a no-brainer, but that's the problem, is my definition of success isn't his, and that's not wrong, but that's just
Right.
my definition of success, right? And then the last one, let me just talk this last one as I'm talking, is no, the Dean Jackson's criteria for success is no whiny people in your life, right? So think about that in your life as a dentist. Not just your team members, but think about the patients, right? Think about your supply partners. Think about all of those things, like not just um not just your team members, but think about beyond that. Like who are you actually partnered with? Your patients, your vendors. Who do you buy stuff from? Like, are there whiny people in your life? And if so, is it worth keeping? Right. So,
Yeah, and I think I get that this list is an example. We're using Dean Jackson's criteria as an example, but this is also kind of a litmus test. You know what I mean? So I think if one of these things, if you're listening to this and one of these items that Jared just went through makes you flinch, I don't think that's a coincidence. It's probably a milestone that you've been avoiding, right? If you're like, oh, yeah, well, that resonates poorly or whatever, that's probably something that, and again, it might not be your criteria of success, but it also is like maybe a little bit of a wake up call. So hopefully that is, shaking the bed a little bit.
yeah. And so, like I said, this is Dean Jackson's list. This is not my list. Here's the exercise you take from this. Go write 6 of your own. Define success for you, right? It's the same format. I know I'm being successful when ... right? Not goals. Like when I have $1 million in the account, right? Not numbers. So step away from the numbers for a minute. Define success and something besides, don't give it a numerical value, right? Think of this as conditions. I know I'm being successful when I can work on projects on a daily basis that excite me. It's a new way of thinking.
I'm done by 3 o'clock. Whatever.
I can drop my kids off at school and start seeing patients at 9:30 without feeling guilty. Right? Whatever whatever it is, rewrite it, and I try to come up with 6. Try to do it, and if you can't, come up with 3 or 4, whatever it is. But I want you to think about this differently than what you've been doing in the past. It's a pretty powerful exercise.
Yeah, I actually did this, Jared. It's funny. I did this exercise a couple of years ago as I was trying to kind of like I said, because seasons are changing for me. I'm trying to reestablish what my definition of success was, and so to go through and do this was really powerful. And it did 2 things. One, it made me appreciate my station in life, the people in my life a whole lot more. I was really grateful for you know the things that were, we talk about the gap in the gain in the book, but, looking at the gain, looking back from where we've come and the things we've been able to do, both as a business and as my family, me personally, it was really cool and filled with a lot of gratitude and appreciation for, um, where I was, where I've come, where we're going, all of that stuff. And so this is a really, really cool, exercise to accomplish. And again, you'll probably need to do it every few years just to kind of check in and see if you're if you're on track, but B, also if like, is that still, aligning up with what you're intending? But yeah, it's such a good exercise.
This is especially important if you have a partner or if you're in a group. Like,
Yeah.
the other partners in group, they need to know what your definition of success is. Otherwise, you're fighting against each other, and it can become frustrating. It can be an area of frustration. It's interesting. Also, like you said before, like you may think you know what your definition of success is, but when you actually sit down and write it out and you start working towards it intentionally, oftentimes you're like, man, this isn't even really what I thought it's not really what I want. I mean, I thought I wanted this. I mean, how many times have we worked with doctors who are like, yeah, I want to be a big group practice owner. I want to have 3 or 4 or 5 different practices, and this is what. And then they get their second or third practices, and they're like, this is not what I'm
Never
interested.
mind. This is
But if,
terrible.
yeah, but if you don't define that, if you don't talk about that, if you don't sit down and say this is what I want to do, then you start working towards that, and you just we're such type A. We have such dogged determination. We had to get into dental school, to get through dental school, that we often be like, I can do it. Oh, I can do it. But do you want to? Is it really what you're striving for? I mean, define it really. There's no medal at the end for persevering to get something that you defined 10 years ago that you don't really want. Right. That's what I think. I'm giving you permission to change your mind. It's okay. Right? It's okay. So, um,
I think one of the things that would help if you're listening to this and you're wanting to know how to do this, Jared and I have both done vision boards. And I think that this was something we've done it differently. But we both have our vision boards. And I think that this is, we're lucky because we get to share it via, lectures and stuff like that. So we get to see each other visions board, but especially if you have a partner or if you have an associate even, it's probably worth sharing these things, but create a vision board. And I think that, like I said, this is going to become something that is a living, I guess document, that you're going to change as you move forward. But I think it's really helpful. I mean, it's got some stuff on there that anybody can look at and it'll make sense to them right away. I can look at Jared's and know immediately, where his points of interest are, what he's striving for. It was kind of cool to see him then hit the goals. I think about, Jared, when you originally set out to become a bodybuilder, that's no small ambition. You know what I mean? And what does that have to do with dentistry? Directly nothing, but indirectly a whole lot actually, because it's tied to your career and the ability to have the freedom to, you switch. You didn't just be like, I think I'll become a bodybuilder. Like it's like, I'm gonna go and work on a car. That is not the freaking same thing. It is a lifestyle, and so you had to have a career that supports that kind of lifestyle, right? A lot of bodybuilders are actually they just work at the freaking gym because that's where they live all the time. They're always there. So, it sounds like something small, but when you're working next to somebody and watching it, maybe it's who knows what that ambition is, but if you can share that through a vision board, and not only does the vision board help you share it, but it helps to coalesce everything in your mind as well. Like, am I leaving something out? Does this really convey what my ambitions are and how I define success? So I think vision boards are really powerful, and it's if you're going to do that exercise, create a vision board, and then share it with people that mean that matter to you and that can support you in those.
Yeah, especially if you're married. This is incredibly important because your vision board oftentimes needs to be shared vision. Your significant other needs to know what you're striving for, what you're wanting to shoot for. So my vision board, I love this, Dan, because we did it a little differently. And let's take a second to share how we did it because I did mine on Pinterest. I have a Pinterest account and I created different categories. I created different boards. It's called my vision boards, and I have different boards within my vision board. And one was my summer lifestyle, my winter lifestyle, my health status, even down to my kids and what I'm thinking that they're going to do, down to my commuter vehicles. I mean, I went down and created. I probably have 10 or 12 different subsections within my vision board because I needed to define that rather than have the ideas just in my head. Oftentimes I'll have these discussions with my wife, but for her to see it, and then for me to show my partner, say, look, this is my summer lifestyle. This is what I really want to do in the summertime versus the wintertime, and so on and so forth. So they can be on board and say, okay, then let's do this. So a vision board, I think, is an incredible idea, and it will weed out a lot of ideas, some thoughts that maybe you had in your mind, and as you see them on the board, you're like, that doesn't make sense. That's actually not what I'm
Mhm.
looking for. So it'll not only weed out ideas, but it will create or generate maybe some further discussion with your significant other, then also if you have a partner or your a group practice you're a part of.
Yeah, the way that I did it, yeah, a little different. So I sat down and started writing down how I define success, like what matters the most. And what I found was that almost everything that revolved around success for me had to do with freedom. So freedom of time, freedom of money, freedom of choice, all these different things. And so realizing that mine was based on freedom, I started to break it down and say, well, what are the limitations of freedom? And so I put it into categories of, so I looked at physical health, spiritual health, business health, because if you are unhealthy in any of these, and I had a few other categories, but if you're unhealthy in any of those categories, those limit your freedom. For example, I've been injured multiple times in my life, more times than I can count. Every freaking time I'm hurt, I'm limited. My freedom gets limited. Either I can't move right, or I can no longer go do the thing that I wanted to do. Probably the thing I did when I got hurt. So that's a good example of like, okay, health then becomes, being injury free, being pain free, but also like having the ability to go to the gym when I want, be able to do the lifts that I want. If there's something I can't do, I can find an alternative and a workaround. So this is the idea. And then I took all of those concepts and I distilled it down to a single photo. And I found a photo that represented whatever that was. And I put it on, I'm super dorky. And I just took it on I literally used PowerPoint, and I just took and I cropped these photos into this one single like big picture that has all these different unique aspects of the ways that I define success. And so that it's a reminder for me. And I visit it quite often and go back and look, and I do a check-in to see, okay, am I hitting my markers, and I wish I could say I nail it all the time, but I don't. There's a lot of times where I'm falling short on my goals, and so it gives me something, just this last week, Lindsay and I were talking. We went on a hike with the dogs, and we were talking about some things where I'm falling short right now. And it was like, all right, I gotta up my game. And the other thing that I do is to help me on this is that each night I write a list down of to dos. This is straight out of the Gap in the Game. I write down a list of to dos and I circle the two that are the highest priority, and I make those a priority for the next day. And then at night, I go back to my list and make sure I did those two things. So that is very empowering and helps me to work towards what I think is success. So yeah, I mean, there's a few ways to do it, but that's a couple of things that I do in my world, and take it or leave it. But that's hopefully, between the two of us, it's unlocking some ideas for you guys on how to, create this vision board for yourself.
Yeah, and I think you already you alluded to the next part of this. As you create your vision board or your dream, you're starting to get this idea. You start to understand there's three things you need to have once you kind of nailed this idea or feel comfortable with an idea. It allows you to see, okay, what tools do I need to make this happen? Right? What is the infrastructure that is going to make this possible? Right? Two, what are the strategies? Now, how do I go about this? And then three, who's my network? Meaning, what people do I need to include in this, or what people need to know about what I'm doing in order to be able to help me achieve this? So, as you start to sit down and say, okay, I think I've got a pretty good idea of what I want. I have these, maybe 6 points, or I have these pictures, or I have whatever this BHAG is outside of your numerical value of how much you want to earn. Then sit down and say, okay, these are the tools that I need to make it happen. I need to have this, this, this. These are the strategies. Okay, this is my strategy for doing this. This is how I'm going to accomplish this. And then this is my network. These are the people, my wife, my partner, my, maybe my kids, maybe whatever, maybe whoever it is. These are the people that you need to do to in order to be able to achieve that goal. Right. And then once you have those things, then it's a cascade, meaning you start with the 10-year vision. Okay, so this is what we call the BHAG, and we've been saying BHAG. I don't know if we've actually ever defined it. BHAG is your big, hairy, audacious goal, right? You have this 10-year plan of this is what I want my life to look like. But in order to do that, you have to break that down into steps. I think this is where the magic happens. We this is something that we pull straight out of traction, but it's not like traction specific. It's just a very logical way to do this, right? So after you get this 10-year vision, you have to break it down into 3-year, 1 year, and then quarterly. Meaning, you have this vision in 10 years. It's not super defined, but it's there, right? 3 years, you're getting a little more defined. In 3 years, what does that look like? Am I going to be on track for that BHAG? And then once you get that, once you say, yes, okay, this is what I have to accomplish in 3 years in order to accomplish this tiny thing. And you break down into 1 year. Okay. In the next year, this is what I need to do. And this is where dentists get in trouble. At the end of the year, what do? At December comes around, January 1, we sit down and say, well, hey, let's make a 1-year plan for the practice. What are my goals for the practice this next 1 year? But we don't think, is that 1-year plan going to help me accomplish my 3-year plan, which is there to help me accomplish my 10-year plan, right? We go year by
On
year.
how you define success too, right? I mean, that's the other thing is like it's after you've defined success, you need to be able to look at it and say 10 years based on, and that's where your personal, a lot of times your personal life and your business life collide, but those need to be business goals, not personal goals, just to add some clarity really quickly.
Yeah. And so if you're colliding, right, if your personal life and your business, then that's wrong, right? Then your business goals should be set in order for you to help you accomplish your plan.
Right.
Right. And so, but if these are if your plan is to have freedom, and in your business plan says in 10 years, I want to own 20 practices, That's not going to happen, right? That's a clash, right? And so you have to be able you have to be able to reconcile those. You have to be able to say, this is what I want my life to look like in 10 years. And this is and my business, and I have to do this in my business in order to accomplish that. So when you sit down for your 1 year, am I accomplishing 3 year, accomplishing my 10 year? And then once that's the case, once those have meshed and that makes sense, then you can break down into quarters and say, okay, for this quarter, this is what I'm going to accomplish in my business. These are the specific tasks, goals that are going to help me get to the 1 year, which is a small part of the 3 year, which is then part of the 10-year plan. So we do it backwards. We go 1 year, and then we do year by year, and then 10 years down the road, we're in a bigger hole than what we were as far as further away from our dreams, because we never actually defined them. We're optimizing ourselves and optimizing our practice into becoming a machine that then controls us. We find ourselves spiraling, and then that's when you end up with getting burned out, because you're like, I built this machine, this practice, and but I'm 10 years down the road from where I was, and I'm not where I thought I should be. I realize that now, that chasing the money or whatever, chasing the bigger building, chasing the multiple, it didn't actually bring me any happiness. So
Yeah, and I think really quickly, Jared, let's talk about the types of BHAGs, right? So you have your target oriented goals, you have your competitive goals, you have your role model goals, and you have your internal transformation goals. The thing that about it, regardless of what these 4 goals are, it's really important. We beat this drum a lot, is that your goals have to be measurable and obtainable, right? So you can't have some pie in the sky, weird freaking, goal that you can't measure. Like, we want, what would be one that was like, you can't have it vague where it's like, do more procedures that we enjoy. Okay, well, that's a good goal. How are you going to measure that, right? You need to break it down and make it measurable. So be careful to not fall in the trap of like increased revenue, this year. Okay, you can make that measurable, but you got to make sure that it's well defined, and don't get lost in difficult goals. And by the way, so there are some challenging arenas within a practice for setting measurable goals. Just giving your assistants goals, for example. I don't want to get too deep into, because we're talking about BHAG, but there are some arenas that it becomes kind of challenging. So that sounds like, oh, that's a trivial thing to talk about, but actually it's really important. Now, having said that, I think target oriented goals are the ones that we're all the most familiar with, right? They are quantitative, they're unambiguous. Numbers are easy, right? Because you say, produce, $2 million next year. Okay, well, that's an easy thing. In 10 years, I want to be producing 5 million. And then, you break it down into 3 year and 1 year, and you can start to move towards that, so target oriented are the ones where we have, I would say, the majority of goals fall within, don't you think, Jared?
yeah, but I absolutely, I think that's the norm. I think that's the standard that's set a lot by our profession, and I think that's where we get into a lot of trouble. But I think there's nothing wrong with it, as long as you understand why in 10 years you want your practice to be producing $5 million, right? So I want my $5 million is going to allow me to live my life this way.
Have
right?
meaning behind the number.
Exactly. But yes, and there's nothing wrong with that goal, as long as you understand that
Right.
stipulation, right?
Yeah.
I want to be the number one implant provider in my county, or whatever, or whatever that
How do you
numerical
measure
goal.
that?
That's our hey, one guy say, I want to be the best dentist, but I want to be known as the best dentist.
I want to be the best dentist in the state. Okay,
Yeah.
great ambition. How are you going to measure it?
Yeah.
The second one, which is kind of interesting because it falls in this thing that we're talking about, is the competitive BHAG, right? In the competitive BHAG, this is where the team unites to outperform a specific competitor. I actually like this a lot. I like that Russell Brunson talks about throwing stones. Sometimes you get to the point where Maybe there's someone that you want to meet or exceed what they're doing. But again, you have to make sure that you can track what that means. So an example would be the corporate group or the DSO that's moved into your market. You want to be competitive with them or outperform them, right? So you can set a 10-year goal to outperform them, but with that understanding, you got to watch out and make sure that you know what they're performing at, because when you think you do, you may not. And so to understand, again, watch out for this one, because this is where you can fall into ambiguity and you may not be able to define these goals very well. It's good to have that competitive edge, but you don't lean on that if it doesn't work for you, right? If it's not going to help you to achieve, again, how you define success, then don't set a competitive BHAG. It's not necessary.
This is one also where this is, I think this is a very difficult one to measure 100%. One of the strengths of this one is that this is easier for the team to rally behind. So the team they can see the Goliath, right, and be like, okay, and they can identify themselves as the David, and we're gonna come together to work together to defeat this giant. So there's pros and cons to all of these. I think that's one of the pros of this one. Like I said, the hard part is it's fragile, right? It's hard to measure. It's so you're also risking defining your practice by someone else's moves, whatever they end up doing. So that's potentially a difficult one as well. But this is one I think that the team can unite behind.
Yep, absolutely. Third one is a role model BHAG. So, again, watch out with these because they can be a little ambiguous, but you become the practice others in your niche study, right? So, and we have these within EA for sure, where we have practices that are our archetypal practices that we say, okay, here's a role model practice. I want you to look at this. And then, but the key to this is that, and we talk about something in our life peak, in that framework that's called prototyping. And what you want to do with, if you, one of your BHAGs is a role model BHAG, and you see a practice that's doing something, you're like, dang, that's where we want to become. We want to become the target for everybody else. Like this practice is, or this guy or this gal that I know in this other state, then go and talk to them and find out what they've done. But if you want to be and I call these status practices. If you want to be a status practice, then there are things that you probably should have as far as visibility and outward facing, marketing. This is something that, again, if it fits what your profile is and what you're looking for, then utilize this. That you don't have to use all four of these, by the way. These are just types.
As a personal experience with this, Dan, is our treatment coordinator desperately wants our practice to be this and do this. And remember, she stated this probably 10 years ago. I think right when you came on, she's like, I want to be the practice that others look to, that come in and study us, see how we do stuff. And and what was about a month ago, we actually had a Korean dentist fly in from Korea to study and observe our practice and how we run, how we use EAOS, how we have our meetings, how he was floored. Like, and he teaches at two of the top dental schools in Korea. He's a prosthodontist. He has a practice with 6 or 7 different dentists, but he flew in and became, and it's funny, and we didn't think much about it, you and I, but it wasn't until she pointed out, she's like, this is what we've wanted or kind of shot for a long time, is to become this type of practice. And I think it's interesting because there's no financial incentive to be this.
No.
Like, there's no kickback for a person coming to, but whatever you define as your level of success, right? And if you're creating the practice people are flying into, and to you that is success, boom, right? You do it and create it. But it's an interesting BHAG, a role model BHAG. I
Yeah.
never thought about it until just about a month ago.
I will say this: if you want to be a role model practice, and that's one of the BHAGs that you've got, you better have some chutzpah and be ready to buckle up and white knuckle some spots because it's scary as hell. Some of the things that because we've had to be a role model practice with being consultants, people are definitely going to look at what we're doing here. And we have to be able to show them and say, okay, we put our money where our mouth is. And really, this is what separates EA from most consulting groups is like our full-time job is dentists, not consultants. And so, we have to be able to put our money where our mouth is and showcase like, yeah, our processes are proven and we can show you. And we've done the things that are scary. We've done the things that are hard, and we've done the things that have lost money because we've screwed up and gone, well, that didn't work, and you have to be willing to take those risks and those chances. So if that's your goal, just be, Judas, let's talk about it, because you better be ready to white knuckle and grin and bear a lot of difficult and stressful situations. The fourth is internal transformation, BHAG. And this is where you change what the practice fundamentally is. I think this is one of my favorite ones because if you are working towards your idea of success, a lot of times you have to change some things that are happening within or the actual structure of the practice. Maybe that means bringing in associates. Maybe it means bringing in a partner. Maybe it means completely switching like the identity of the practice. Maybe before you were a cosmetic only, but it's not servicing your goals well. So now you got to switch it into more of a family practice or whatever. These are really, really cool goals. I like the first and the second myself, or excuse me, the first and the fourth. So I like, your internal transformation, and I'm a big fan of target oriented, just the way my brain works. But for you, pick from one of these four things and utilize these to help to shape out your 10-year goals.
I mean, we're going through this internal transformation as far as we were an insurance practice. We took insurances and we built up systems and processes around disseminating insurance to discovering what codes are used to, all that sort of stuff. All sorts of strategies that you do as an insurance-driven patient. We realized that we weren't achieving our BHAG with that. We were never going to have the time and freedom that we both wanted. And so we decided to go through this huge internal transformation of becoming a fee for service practice, having our own patient benefit plan and really providing a different type of dentistry than we have I've been doing this for 20 years. I've been in the Valley for 20 years. And to go through this internal transformation BHAG, it's more of a psychological process than what you realize it is. It is a huge commitment to do that, and, but it is also maybe one of the more rewarding of the four, I think, personally, too. So I'm with you, like, I think, you can, choose one or two of these, whatever you feel like you wanna work on, but I think these are four great categories for BHAGs.
Well, Jared, before we wrap up, I think I want to talk a little bit about stress testing before someone commits to what they are, and then if you wouldn't mind just talking about, just name a couple places where we see BHAGs go wrong. So I think that you should ask some 4 questions to stress test your goals. First of all, can you name the finish line? You have to have an end goal in mind, right? That's the whole point of the 10-year target. So if you don't do that, it's a direction, not a goal, right? So make sure you can name the finish line. So that's number 1. Number 2 is that, does it scare you slightly? And I love that. I love this idea of, like I was saying earlier, you should be pulling yourself. That's the whole idea of an audacious goal. Like, it's a big, hairy, audacious goal, is that it should be a little scary. And maybe you think it's not even achievable. Maybe like, this is ridiculous. It should be a little ridiculous, like, honestly. So, and then 3, what does it require you to stop doing? A big goal that doesn't cost you anything isn't a big goal, right? If there's no level of investment or sacrifice to achieve this goal, then it's neither big, hairy, audacious, or a goal. It's just what you're just letting life happen to you. So keep that in mind. Like, what does it require you to stop doing? Or on the flip side, what does it require you to start doing? And then the other thing is this is how well you're communicating it to your team. Can a team member state it back to you accurately after only hearing it once? Is it succinct enough, which is a challenge for me? Is it succinct enough and clear enough that they can rattle it back to you without with a basic understanding of it after only hearing it once? So that's the stress test. So that's, you can utilize that to go back and say, have I done a good job of clearly defining my goals? Is it servicing the what a BHAG is, and is it working towards my greater definition of success?
Yeah. Yeah. And then I'll just review some of the talking points as far as where we see this going wrong with a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think the biggest issue is when somebody tries to copy somebody else's goal.
Mm.
You're like, oh, there's nothing wrong with and this is hard because I do think that there's incredible amount of value in talking with other people about their goals. Right. So what is your BHAG? That's the whole reason why we get together in Belize for a week in February, is to interact with other dentists, take a couple of days away, and start have these incredibly important conversations. But don't just copy what they're doing, right? Take that information, maybe copy a portion of it, maybe like, oh, that sounds a good idea. But don't just copy it, because then you're just going to spend 10 years, you're climbing the wrong mountain, and then you look out and you're like, this, I don't even want to be here. Like, it sounds good, but so define your own version of success. I think that's the first one. That is where it goes wrong. The next one is, I think when you define it, you get to a point where, yeah, and then you kind of file it away, right?
Mm.
You should be like, okay, we'll revisit this in a year. One of the biggest things we've talked about bodybuilding, one of the biggest things about being successful at anything, and for me, I learned this really on bodybuilding, is being consistent, meaning every single day, every meal, everything. And consistency is boring. And I don't know how to, and that's why most people don't do it, is because it's boring. But consistency is the only thing that's going to get you on to that final goal, right? And so if you set this goal and then you kind of forget about it and then review it annually, you're never going to get there, right? That's the second thing. The other one is if you can't translate this BHAG into your practice. I think a lot of times we struggle. We create these BHAGs. We have these vision boards, awesome. But then we talk. Then you run the practice, and they collide. These things collide. So it's never translated into your practice, right? So you have to figure out how to say, this is my BHAG. 10 years, I want to look like this. What does my practice have to look like in 10 years for my personal BHAG to coincide perfectly with my practice BHAG? I think that's where we get lost, right? So you have to be able to know how to bring those two together, and then be able to on a daily basis, on a Tuesday, be like, this is my practice. I'm working towards this in order to achieve my BHAG, and boom, we're together, right?
Yeah, and I think sharing it well is part of that, right? Making sure the team understands
Yes.
where the end point is. Yeah.
Yeah, like you said before, and with one of the stress tests, can your team tell
Yeah.
you where the practice is going in order for for us to achieve our goal? And then the last thing I think where maybe it goes wrong is we just wait. Wait for certainty, and this is my biggest fault, is I like to be certain before we do it. And you know what? Um, I think this, I'm not the only one, because we've had this biggest complaint is people are like, oh, I don't want to set the BHAG because what if it's the wrong one? What if I'm going down the wrong path? Well, the only way to know if you're going down the wrong path is to start that wrong path. You got to go down it. And you may be now 3 months, 6 months, a year into that path and be like, this isn't where I wanted to be at all. Great. You figured it out, rather than wait for 10 years to be like, oh man, I don't even know where do I want to be, floating around, right? Like, start the process, define it, go down that path. Wrong path. No big deal. Start over again. That's the beauty of the whole thing. And so, those, I think, where BHAGs go wrong, but it costs you more to wait than just to start doing something. Just start, define it. And that's when you can start to realize things you do want, or what you don't want. Right.
Well, dude, I think this is I love talking about this. Hopefully you guys will be able to have a chance to come to either our outfitters course or one of our summits, and you can hear and talk with Jared one-on-one on this stuff. He's got an amazing lecture based on this whole thing that, again, we're trying to give you all the secrets here. So this is, again, just a review. This is our milestone 1 of our life framework. Our leadership framework. And we're going to continue through all 8. So get geared up. And again, feel free to reach out with us if you have questions. It doesn't cost you anything to reach out. We're not going to, hawk you and bug the crap out of you if you do. We just are here to help out. We love doing it. If you have more questions, go to elevationassociation.com. You're welcome to find us on social media or drop us a line at elevationassociation@gmail.com. And we'd love to chat. So we're here to help. We're here to collaborate. We want to elevate us as a group of dentists and elevate the profession. So we can't do it alone. So jump on board and let's see what we can do. Jared, any other parting thoughts or shots?
My only last thought is I love this topic as well, Dan, because this is the foundation. This is where we start.
Totally.
You start with this, right? And the reason is because you're going to spend the next 10 years somewhere doing something, right? The question then you need to answer is it because you chose it or because you inherited it, right? And I inherited my vision for a long time, and that was a mistake, and I hate that. I wish I could go back and I wish I could do it again. But we're here to help you avoid that mistake, and we would love to work with you, talk with you about it. You're not gonna. This isn't an answer you're going to get over a weekend. It's not. This is an exercise that takes a while to do and be patient with it and work through it and really think about it. This isn't something that you sit down and be like, yeah, this is it. But we're good at challenging that and helping you define that and work through that. It's another sign where we want to be part of your network as you're trying to discover this and work through this. So we're passionate about it. We'd love to do it. Get a hold of us. Like Dan said, come spend some time with us, either with an outfitters course or on one of our summits, whatever, and just, plug into the network. And that's what we're here for. So.
All right, guys. Well, we got to run. Go help a doc make sure he isn't getting fleeced on a new practice acquisition. So we're going to go do that. Hope everybody has a good week. We will see you next time. Cheers.
Adios.